Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining the presentation. My name is Nina Beguš. I'm a researcher at UC Berkeley, working at the intersection of literary studies and STS with a focus on language and AI. I've been working on this topic for over 15 years now, and I'm very happy to present some of my work here in this series called The Language Machine, AI, Language and Education. Thank you very much to Tom Garza from UT Austin's Language Center for inviting me. So I'd like to talk about three connected topics. AI entering the curriculum and the revamping of our curricula. I argue that AI is not a replacement for teaching, as it's commonly said, but it's more a tool for recalibration. There's a paper that's coming out in early 26, co-written with my wonderful colleagues at the MLA task force, where we focus on generative AI and world languages. And we explain this view in more detail that I'm going to share here a bit. And then the second topic will be my research framework of artificial humanities that I hope will prove to be generative to my colleagues as well. My book, it's titled Artificial Humanities, A Fictional Perspective on Language in AI, argued that these humanistic insights should be used for AI development. The book is available from the University of Michigan Press, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and so on. And it's also going to be open access. And on my website, I will also share my slides for the undergraduate course on artificial humanities that I'm teaching at Berkeley this year. And then as a third topic, I'll come to creative assignments, showing a few practical approaches in using AI or talking about AI with your students that I've experienced in my orbit. So I have a couple of teaching goals that I apply to all my teaching and advising, but I would say this one is the leading one. It's preparing my students for a world of conceptual novelty, so that they are able to critically question whatever they encounter, so that they are able to evaluate it, often from a humanities perspective that we offer. I want them to be equipped with critical thinking, historical knowledge, intercultural competence. And I do think that AI literacy should be added to this list, no matter what subject you teach. If we just take into the account that from the moment large language models were invented around 2018 until they were publicly available in November 22, this is the exact time some of our students graduated. They started college and they graduated in that time. They faced a world of new technical and conceptual novelty. They're facing new jobs that haven't existed before, together with the loss of some jobs and tasks that are getting automated by AI. And so I absolutely agree. It's sort of uninspiring to see the American and Chinese market really compete for this automation while human-centeredness seems to be forgotten in how AI products are being developed. And I think humanistic skills are really exceptional here and will be more and more needed, even in technical professions and especially in AI. And so what a teacher could do in their own domain is really to recalibrate their learning objectives by evaluating AI's limitations and especially AI affordances. And so we recalibrate by not starting from scratch, but by recognizing and reinforcing what's already working in our classrooms, while we also reconsider AI's roles in our students' lives and in our classroom. And this is, of course, not a definitive task. It's a rather difficult task. We're dealing with a thing that has legs. right? AI is changing so much that a month of a human time is more as a year in AI's time. And we can't even often point out to what the limitations are or what the affordances are. We're all just kind of experimenting still. And most studies, of course, on AI are written about large language models, mostly about text or images. So not even research is really comprehensive in understanding of this technology because there is much more. There are other architectures to other models and so on. So a lot is happening. And whatever we write now might not hold true anymore once the paper is out. But a lot of what is happening is also very one-sided, often media-centered. There's this narrative being told by commercial actors. And as researchers, as teachers, as administrators, we inevitably see things differently. We're not a business, right? We are obliged to engage with curiosity. And so we can see here that there's this irreplaceable value of deep reading, critical thinking, culturally situated knowledge, which remains a skill that AI models can't really replicate or replace. And so we can use this as an opportunity to think about how to engage with AI in a productive, in a positive way, even if we decide not to include AI to our class. We basically are required to invent new pedagogies. And so in this way, I just really want to emphasize that AI doesn't have to be a replacement. It is not a replacement. It doesn't have to be a shortcut, but it can be a creative multiplier, including a critical thinking multiplier. Because we got these chatbots now that are trained on class materials that actually do not hallucinate. We got tools to practice foreign languages, for example, in text and speech and so on. So AI allows for this low stakes environment practice outside of the classroom. It allows for this preliminary overview of the topic. It helps with deciphering the materials so that we as teachers can dedicate our time to higher order skills, intercultural competencies, for example, interpretative, interpersonal communication, empathy, dialogue, richer debates. All that we can do while we're aware of AI's performance gaps, hallucinations, monolingual and monocultural training, and alignment. Limitations will change and affordances will change. And so we have undergone these called peaks of inflated expectations and throes of disillusionment with pretty much every innovation trigger. We have the Gartner hype cycle here, which really provides a graphic representation of the maturity and adoption of technologies and their social applications. And these Gartner hype cycle is really used for businesses to help them solve their business problems or exploit new opportunities. So there's kind of two worlds here, but we're all experiencing the same roller coaster. And you can put yourself on that line wherever you think we are now, about 7 years in with AI. But what's happening with professional organizations is there is close to zero tolerance for AI, and it's kind of getting more negative in a way that these reports that are coming from professional organizations such as Modern Language Association that partner with College Composition and Communication team, they put out reports in 23 and 24. We've just gotten the American History Association report, and they're really pushing back against AI because our classrooms feel colonized, right, by AI. There's this anxiety around the myriad of issues the technology presents outside the classroom. And they're understandable, right? A recent MIT study showed this reduced neural connectivity when drafting an essay with the help of a language model. So this overall intellectual atrophy seems incumbent. And then there's the copyright issue, right? Copyright was breached, intellectual property is challenged, hallucinations are still not solved, social linguistics misfires remain a challenge, especially in lower resourced languages and their varieties. Reading stamina is fading, enrollments are dropping. Granted, these two issues have been preceded by AI, but are certainly exacerbated by it. So I understand this stance of pushing back, but I find it really impossible because many of these problems have been co-occurring with information technology innovations, and AI is just adding to it. People have been through all these leaps before. Of course, they were not the same, but there is a historical resemblance. When we invented other information technologies, for example, writing, Socrates was famously against it because it affects our memory. We're outsourcing our memory. Accounting turned into economics, finance. It became very complex. And in that way, looking at technology in this way, they are becoming more complex. The world is becoming more complex. As a young person, you have to know more now than you used to. When print was invented, when we went from manuscripts to books, the universities of the 19th century weren't quite sure how will they survive. They thought they might be replaced by books, which, in retrospect, it seems a silly sentiment, but at that historical moment, it was very real. Looking at telegraph, telephone, radio, broadcast, TV, computing, the internet, social networks, social media. They've all just exacerbated the problems, the digital era problems of security, privacy, misinformation, and now AI has been dropped on top of all this. And of course, as teachers, when we think about it, when calculator was invented, math had to be taught differently, but this is even bigger, right? AI is a part of the workflow, and solving complex social challenges such as public health, climate change, AI ethics, cultural AI really requires interdisciplinary teams, which is why I wrote Artificial Humanities. It was really to bring these deep humanistic insights up to the current challenges posed by technology, posed by AI. And I find AI philosophically interesting because what happens to language, to human languages, when machines use it? It's this big change in how we conceptualize language, how we conceptualize ourselves as humans. Humans were exempt from the rest of the world by using language, right? We were this homo cogitans, the reasoning being, and now we have invented a new kind of reasoning based in silicon, not in biological neural networks. And so when you think about AI as a computational breakthrough that happened entirely outside of our fields, and it just so happened that neural networks happen to work well in language, it was really a solution to an engineering problem, right? And it surprised us all with its abilities to generate language. We didn't know that there's enough information in language to generate language in that way. And so this conceptualization of language that we have now in machine learning stands in stark contrast from how language is produced and practiced in humans, right? In education, language is at the core of the human experience. We express ourselves in a language of our own, or in a language that we learn. We learn about other people's perspectives through language. Language is at the core of who we are and at the core of education. This is how we learn. That's how our education system is set up. But then in language models, language is completely decoupled from the human subject, decoupled from its grammatical structures as well. And so this training process worked through tokenization. So you have these data agnostic models dissect data in language, not into words, which are cognitively, linguistically discrete units, but into tokens. Language is dissected into tokens, which function more as this continuous numerical input that language models need for their computation. So this word embeddings was really this pivotal technique, an engineering workaround, really a trick to circumvent the word token difference. So embeddings assign numbers to tokens. So in language models, they kind of the tokens serve as this universal language or this universal representational substrate in which pretty much any human language can work. So any human language can be transformed into tokens in latent space, and then further, any human language can be generated from it. So that's, I think, a big change in how we think about language. And so when I thought about writing artificial humanities like 15 years ago, I was thinking of my students as well, thinking of these rapid advances in technology, including AI, including biotechnology, having really profound impact of our perception of human essence, posing pressing ethical questions, of course, but also very deep and basic philosophical ones. And so I designed my teaching really around this premise that literature provides a unique space for reflection on these topics, and that the humanities should be central in this debate. And the main goal of my teaching, as I said, is to prepare students for their future. And I was really doing that just by finding new connections between literature and other fields of their interest, exploring how fiction can provide answers to complex philosophical and ethical questions, answers to our humanity. And so I found this approach has a really good advantage because I got students with very diverse backgrounds. Some are in humanities, many are in computer science, data science, cognitive science. And I can see how they're able to excel in this kind of setting. And I am also able to evaluate the outcomes more effectively by really just following their projects as they grow. And so in every aspect of my work, I brought together literature, history, and art to kind of deepen this understanding of artificial intelligence and its development. And I see now that pretty much what I would call a humanization of computer science is happening, kind of in the same way as economics has undergone humanization, turning from a highly quantitative discipline into this behavioral economics subdiscipline and similar disciplines. And so in the book, in Artificial Humanities, I really examined just these fictional representations of AI in parallel with the actual technological developments and the imaginary behind that, what the technologists were trying to build and what they've actually built. And through this, artificial humanities as this new interdisciplinary framework was developed to serve us to better understand the cultural, philosophical, ethical dimensions of AI. And I think it's important for every teacher to contextualize AI in their own field. What does it mean for literature and literary studies? What is the future of writing? We'll get to this in part 3. What does it mean for mathematics, for its history? How will history be written and researched from now on? How will art be practiced from now on in collaboration or in refutation of AI, and so on. So I think developing this critical eye is really an ethical imperative for all of us. And I think of ethics here just merely as a response to the world, kind of a minimally viable ethics position, where we do not ignore what is happening, but we respond to it. Even if our response is, I don't like it, I don't want to engage, we over-response, I think. It's a responsibility that we hold to others as teachers, especially to our students. And so here's just a little glimpse of what I've done in the book with this fact and fiction comparison, digging kind of into our individual imaginaries, into our collective imaginaries, to see why we build AI in the human form and why is it so hard to shake it off. And we're playing into this illusion, I guess that would be my diagnosis. We're playing into this illusion of human-like machines, which is why I centered the book around the Pygmalion myth. I think the illusion will inevitably break. And now we're a few years into the early AI in the summer of 2025, when the agentic AI dreams of technologies are coming true. And it's kind of hard to see AI products being subdued into this single marketable form of a role-playing companion and collaborator. I think AI has much more to offer, and we can see this on the outskirts, but there's this hegemonic development of AI that is kind of keeping things limited. I'm just writing a paper on this cultural aspect of AI development and how literary studies can have developed the tools to address issues around cultural AI. The paper will be out in Modern Fiction Studies in a special issue on cultural AI soon. But let's just keep moving on with the contextualization of AI. So there's this very broad approach to contextualization. I'm working together with wonderful microbiologist and biogeochemist Owen Brody from Lawrence Berkeley Lab on this planetary perspective of contextualizing AI. Owen works on all scales, from molecular to ecosystems. And so we observe how Earth as the planet takes advantage of the energy available for work to organize new structures, create new informative systems that process information, that store information in memory, in writing, right? That also transfer information from one system to the other through DNA, through language, through text, and so on. And so this planetary view of information flows, technology here is really just another way of doing what life has been doing from the very beginning, taking advantage of this energy and as a response to a limitation, to a bottleneck, creating an innovation. And so we see AI as a part of this continuum. If we just look at the information storage in the biosphere, you have non-humans first, humans second in purple, and then we have our analog in orange and digital with the red line. You can see the digital already surpassing the analog one. Where to store all this information and how to solve the energy demands of AI are really our immediate challenges, our current bottlenecks that require innovation. And so this is why we're writing about this perspective. We think it can actually be really helpful for the future to think more about how to build technology that works with the planet, that's sustainable in that way, that works within our opportunities and limitations. And then another part of artificial humanities practice is more artistic. We collaborated with Meta Haven and Riccardo Petrini to visualize how a latent space looks in these computational models that we have now. This piece is currently exhibited at the Venice Biennale as a part of a Next Earth exhibition. Why Next Earth? Well, you have latent spaces in machine as a complete novelty, as something that needs to be explored, explained. And so, what are latent spaces? Well, they're created when artificial neural networks are being trained and when they make sense of their data in their own way by really mapping it into this new geography that is hidden inside the latent space. These spaces are not to be observed by humans. They are to be operationalized by algorithms because they are this vast organized structures of vectors with hundreds, even thousands of dimensions. And so in that way, latent spaces are invisible and also unimaginable to us humans. But they are at once mathematical constructs, and they are also deeply cultural entities. They sit at this crossroads of aesthetics, utilitarianism, epistemology, politics, which is why they're also a great topic for a study in the humanities. And I think experimental projects like this could be very exciting for students. This is a whole new area that yet needs to be studied. Another thing that I kind of see as a creative writing assignment is I reached out to writers, professional writers, people who live in the world of words, people who live from the world of words, to see what they think about the entry of AI into this space, into the space of writing. Because when I think about the future of writing, I think my grandchildren might be shocked when I tell them we used to write from scratch. And also, it feels like a place that's it's a place full of anxiety because we know human writing is different from generated writing. And all of these authors, they wrote different essays in this collection we called First Encounters with AI, Writers on Writing. And there was certainly an array of perspectives from very accepting to very negative, but also there was a consensus in saying AI has no meaning, it has no intent, but it has other non-human qualities. You could say, well, yes, it disregards the granular data, right? It generalizes everything. It's full of default styles, genres, cliches, stereotypes, biases. But it can also create an essay or a poem that responds to the world challenges or changes if you prompt it so, right? There's a new way of writing that it enables. And so I solicited this volume because I was thinking, well, there's this idea of an author chained to a desk with their solitary thoughts, where intelligence is clearly a collective phenomenon. And this is why I actually put Agnieszka's current artwork on the cover. It's a bonsai where this artificial part, the blue part, was created by prediction algorithms of its growth. And then the actual bonsai, the natural bonsai, had to grow around it. It's kind of this symbolic representation of AI shaping our lives, our writing in co-agency, co-creation, collaboration. I also think it's great to learn about other people's experiences with AI. This recent essay in the New Yorker is written by a professor who reflects on students' engagement with AI. Right, AI is not general. Every output of a language model is created for the user. And so in that way, it's not as shareable as a book would be or some other artifacts would be. And I think it's really important to share our human experiences around generated text because it's clearly a different genre, a different way of writing, a way of sending a message, a way of role-playing and dialogue. So my research focus is often on cultural imaginaries, and I was very curious about the Pygmalion myth and what it could do, both in the human imaginary and how was it reassessed in synthetic imaginaries by AI. I was also interested in averageness of writing. We're all writers, right? We're all learned how to write. So I wasn't as interested in this skilled writing by professional writers where most of the studies went. So I solicited stories from Amazon mTurk workers back in 2019, and then I compared them to generated stories. I wanted to see what an average person can do with very basic prompting. You didn't need to be an expert to get, high quality output, or maybe you haven't. So back in the day, I wanted to check how that is working. And so another professor found this study and used this double experiment in his own classroom. The students then conducted the experiment. They learned about AI by experimentation, and they also were able to conduct the comparative analysis that was laid out for them in the research paper. So that was a really pleasant surprise back in the early days, I guess 23 or 24. But yeah, each teacher brings their own flavor to it, right? And so does a student with AI and creativity. I think we have to really lean into our students. So here's my student, Siqi Yi, who's finishing her master's in translation studies. And she put a poem in an AI video generator. And she said it turned out better than she'd expected. She was able to observe how her artwork was changed through a pattern recognition device. So let's take a look.
你眼里的蓝，是我没走过的海岸，我从你嘴角中读懂已不出的朦胧。我眸如琥珀，是你结在掌心的紧握。你从我歌声里看见深长可悦。黄是黄河，黑是图坦卡蒙的眼线，红是茶蝶，白是银河落九天。姿势一般，人是要稳稳，世人忙着约会世界，而我们只顾相见。黑是孤雁，红是拉斯科比花如烟连连，白是冰雪，黄是长河落日圆。姿势一般，人是热吻，离是一去不回。
So yeah, I think my point here really is we're still in the early days of AI, and many see it as a low-hanging fruit, the technologists especially. But there's a lot of topics that they don't see yet, a lot of intersections that remain unaddressed. Because before, when technology was offered as an automation service, it was really just to accelerate what the human can do. And now it's kind of an augmentation. It's opening this new space of possibilities that needs to be explored. So I wrote here learning happens through dialogue, through play, through games, through exploration and experimentation. And that's how AI's opportunities and possibilities will happen as well. Thank you so much for listening to this talk, and you can contact me on my email, and I also have a Slack for my research group. If you'd like to join, just email me. Thank you again for your attention. It was an honor to share my work. Thank you.